Hello, Rewinders. Let's talk about it. Barbie has just broke the glass ceiling. That's right. It made $1 billion at the box office this weekend, only after being out for 3 weeks. It's easy to call this an overperformance. I would say expectations were $1 billion would be on the high end of Barbie's final gross. I think most people predicted 500 to 700 million. But if you look at this, we're already at 1,033,590,060. And this movie's still going to play in theaters for at least, I don't know, 6 more weeks with a competitive run. So I would say at this point, it's pretty safe to say this will outgross Mario as the biggest movie of 2023. That's the biggest surprise for me. I thought Mario was unbeatable, but we're already at 459 million. So this should easily outgross Mario. 600 to 650 million seems like it's happening. And then internationally, I don't see how this movie doesn't make $700 million. So we're looking at least 1.4 billion final gross, if not even higher. Maybe it reaches 1.5 billion, which would be pretty unstoppable to beat. I really can't see another movie this year passing that. I did say Mario had no chance of being beat, but what other movie coming out this year is going to make like 1.5 billion? I don't think they're, especially since they're pushing some movies back to 2024. Lots to say here. Great work from Warner Brothers. They really needed this after all the DC movies have been failing recently. There's other projects like Space Jam 2 and IP related stuff they've had that just hasn't taken off. The Harry Potter franchise lost popularity with the Fantastic Beasts series. The question with Barbie, I think more than anything, is this a franchise now? Do you make Barbie 2 and 3? Especially considering the ending of this movie where it doesn't really set itself up for a sequel, in particular with what happens with the Barbie character. But I guess you could just make a movie called Ken and follow his storyline and maybe hire a new filmmaker and let Greta Gerwig produce that. Or maybe this is a one off and they'll never make another Barbie movie, which I think would be nice. But at the same time, why would a studio not follow up something that makes this kind of money? This is such a big hit. This is, I mean, I can't imagine the profits for this movie, what they're going to be like. I'm assuming Robbie and Greta Gerwig both have back end deals. Gosling probably does on some level too. I'm sure nothing major. I doubt Greta Gerwig got, she's not Christopher Nolan. She probably didn't get a 20% upfront gross or first dollar gross. But you have to think this movie's going to make the studio $500 million. The budget for this movie is like 130 million, and I'm sure they spent quite a bit on marketing, at least 100 to 150 million, but they've made that back in spades. And beyond that, this is huge for theaters right now. Theaters really need a movie like this that plays with all sorts of appeal across different markets, and it keeps people coming every weekend because we're in the third weekend here and we're at 53 million with a 43% drop. That's just fantastic. Also, speaking of Warner Brothers, the number two movie, Meg 2 The Trench. I covered the first Meg movie on Box Office Addict several years ago, and I remember it being a surprise hit. And here we are with the Meg 2 that is once again kind of overperformed, despite terrible reviews. I think this movie has like 26% on Rotten Tomatoes. But if you look at the first Meg, everyone always says, well, that movie did well because of China. It was a Chinese hit. But the movie opened to 45 million and made 145 million. In what year was this? 2018. And then it made 530 million worldwide. So really the Meg was a huge hit, even in the United States. I mean, sure, it didn't make its money back from its budget here, but I don't think anyone expected the movie to do this well. And then with the Meg 2 now, it only opened, I mean, it opened $15 million less, but really for a sequel to come out 5 years later and to get terrible reviews, I think 145 million opening's pretty good. And I believe the budget for this film is the same as the first one. It's around 129, 130 million. Jason Statham, kind of low-key a movie star that doesn't get enough credit as a movie star. You think about the Guy Ritchie movies he's been in all the years. You think about his standalone action films like The Transporter, and then obviously the Fast and Furious franchise, and then he's in this Meg franchise. Also, shark movies. I don't think Hollywood quite understands that shark movies is this untapped market that can make crazy bank if you do it right. And nobody ever really tries to make a great shark movie. It's always kind of gimmicky. This also plays into the Godzilla kaiju audience, the King Kong audience. This film definitely shares elements with that. But surprise opening, huge win for Warner Brothers to have 83 million between these two movies in the same weekend. Oppenheimer continues to be a monster. 37.6% drop. That's an insane hold. That's a way better hold than Barbie. Now, obviously, it's not making near the same money as Barbie, but it has to be stated 29 million on its third weekend. I mean, Oppenheimer just keeps blowing me away. 300 million domestic is a lock now. I thought it might come in a little under that, but if it's holding this well, it's going to make 300 mil domestic. It should outgross Inception as Christopher Nolan's third highest grossing film behind the two Dark Knight sequels. And then it's at 556 million worldwide. Some people are speculating right now that this film could even reach 900 million, if not a little bit more, if it overperforms in South Korea and China. Because right now it's heading towards 750 to 800 million without those markets. If you include those markets, you're looking at 900 million, possibly a billion. I think a billion's a stretch. But the fact this movie's going to even be in the discussion of making 850 to 900 million is absolutely absurd. I don't think anybody thought Inception numbers for this film. This is a tough one to talk about the profits for because Nolan gets 20% of first dollar gross. Now, I don't know if that means that he gets 20% of the gross with the movie theater or if he gets 20% of the first dollar gross from the profit the studio gets from the movie. So typically, a studio is going to get 45 to 55% of the overall gross. Typically, they get more on opening weekend and second weekend, sometimes 65%. And then as the weeks play out, the theaters start to get more of the return. So if we do the math on this, and this movie makes 750, let's say $800 million. If Nolan gets the first dollar gross off the percentage based off the box office for the studio's profit, not the overall profit, then he's going to make well over $100 million on this movie. If you just take 20% off, because the profit on this, if it makes 800 million, should be somewhere roughly, and I did this in a calculator before earlier, but it's roughly something like the studio would make something like $400 million plus off this movie, and then Nolan would make over $100 million off that deal. Then you would have to take off the production cost, which is a $100 million budget and $100 million marketing. And let's assume there's some back end for Downey Jr., Matt Damon, Emily Blunt. The studio's still going to clear 120 to 150 million dollars on this movie, depending on its final gross. Now, that's just the box office. We're not going to include what they would get off a deal with streaming, what they're going to get off some money with home video, which is not what it used to be, but it should still be a few million. So there's a big possibility here that Oppenheimer profits the studio $200 million, even paying Nolan over $100 million. This also shoots Nolan into a new category because that's James Cameron, Peter Jackson, Steven Spielberg kind of money. But really impressive performance. I want to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. It made 43 million over the 5-day, 28 million opening weekend. I think this film definitely suffered from the Michael Bay Ninja Turtles movies. The first film in that franchise did pretty well. It made 485 million, and then the second one did half of that at 282 million. So this film kind of had to overcome that. I still think this is a really good performance. This movie cost $70 million. It's definitely done in the animation style of the Spider-Verse movies. And if you look here, it had pretty good word of mouth through the 5-day opening. I think $100 million is definitely in play here for this movie, if the word of mouth stays positive. And hopefully it can make 200 to 250 million worldwide and break even and make them a little bit of profit. Obviously, I think the studio would hope for something that makes $300 million on a $70 million movie. And then you include marketing, which I'm assuming was like 40, 50 million. So, they probably want more than this, and this film did receive very strong reviews. So we're just going to have to wait and see on this one. It's hard to tell. Like, maybe this movie makes 120 million domestically and makes 280 million worldwide. I don't really know. You don't know how well this is, because the Spider-Verse movies aren't big hits internationally. They do much better domestically, And I think this film might have a similar trajectory. Also, the Ninja Turtles, it's kind of hard to know how well that's going to do. They did make an animated Ninja Turtles movie before. Let's go back and look at that if some of you remember it, which I'm sure everybody does, which is TMNT, a movie I saw in the theater, which opened at 24 million on a 34 million dollar budget and made 95 million dollars worldwide. It dropped like a rock after its opening weekend. It was very front loaded. This movie got very bad reviews. I actually like this movie. I think it's got some decent stuff. But if you go back to the original Ninja Turtles from 1990, huge hit. $25 million opening weekend, made 135 mil domestic, 200 million worldwide on a $13.5 million budget. Then you had Secret of the Ooze, which made $78 million. Still a very successful movie, $20 million opening week. And this was just like peak Ninja Turtles in pop culture. The third movie did 42 million, which honestly is better than I thought it did. I thought this movie was just a bomb. 42 million on a $21 million budget isn't bad, and that movie is terrible. Then, of course, we have the Michael Bay reboot in 2014, which made 485 million on a $125 million budget. And then the second film in that franchise, Out of the Shadows. Oh, it's even lower than I said earlier. It made 245 million on a $135 million budget. And we haven't had a Turtles movie in quite a while. Now they're still being doing TV shows, but kudos to them. Honestly, this was a good idea. I think Turtles works better now as an animated thing. If you're gonna do it live action, I don't really know how you top the Jim Henson one from the 90s. So I think animated Ninja Turtles just kind of makes sense. I don't really know how I feel about the movie itself, but whatever. Haunted Mansion, this is embarrassing. 61% drop, 42 million domestic, 60 million worldwide. This is a disaster. This is an absolute disaster. $160 million budget without marketing. They're going to lose at least $50 million on this movie, if not $100 million. Sound of Freedom continues to be a big hit at $164 million. Not much to say here. Just a huge, huge success. Mission Impossible, once again, disappointing. $493 million. This film is going to lose the studio $100 million easily, if not more. Hate to say it, it's one of the biggest failures of Tom Cruise's career in recent years. Not of all time. He's had bigger bombs than this. I don't even know if Mission Impossible 3 is comparable to this, because it just didn't cost nearly as much in 2006. The rest of the stuff's not really worth mentioning. People keep bringing up Elemental and how it's going to make 500 million worldwide, despite a bad opening weekend. That is a success story for Disney on some level, but then when you include Indiana Jones and Haunted Mansion's performance, and then look at all the top movies: Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount. All of these four movies here, I would say, are in a success category right now for the time being, obviously. And then with Disney, it's like, dude, you guys have nothing. You have nothing to brag about. Just an abysmal year for them overall. A really terrible summer, more than anything, excluding Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But just what, this is like the sixth or seventh bomb they've had come out this year with Haunted Mansion. Just terrible job here, terrible producing. Really, just there's not, you can't even analyze it. It's just bad. To drop 61% in your second weekend is just awful. All these other movies are just eating up the rest of the business. You could say, oh, well, it's Barbenheimer's why these movies aren't doing well. Then why is the Meg 2 opening well? Why is Ninja Turtles opening well? It's not Barbenheimer. Also, four movies doing over 28 million in the same weekend. I don't think that's happened for quite a while. I do believe it's happened before, but this is a good sign for the box office being back. You have a movie doing 53, 30, 29, and 28. I mean, that's pretty great. Um, that's a pretty great weekend. I hope we can continue with this the rest of the year and some other movies can come out and make money. But really big bounce back for Warner Brothers here at the end of the summer. And it all goes back to Barbie kicking this off, being a phenomenon. And, it's just worth just celebrating what they did here. So it's great. So what do you guys think? Let me know. What do you guys think about the Meg 2? Where do you think that's going to end up? Obviously, domestically, I don't think it's going to make 145 million. It's got to lean on international. And then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, where does that end up? because we really, we're so early on. So give me your predictions in the comments. Predicting the box office isn't just about understanding the numbers or looking at analytics. You have to feel it. Can you hear the music? I can.